But let's jump into that first story. NBC News reports 12 National Guard members removed from inauguration duty, including 2 for inappropriate comments. The FBI has been screening all service members involved with the inauguration amid growing security concerns. They say, quote, "We have 2 individuals that were identified as making inappropriate comments or texts." I got to stop and just ask, like, what does that mean? Did they post a meme of Hillary Clinton or something, and all of a sudden they're getting kicked out?
Well, it's also stuff that they retweeted that supposedly is bad content, but we're again getting very generalized language, no exact examples, and we should at least get that with the latest news. And again, it's 12 out of 25,000.
It's not a whole lot, but it is kind of weird they're doing it. Yeah. I got to be honest. So actually I have a Twitter thread from Jack Posobiec. He says, White House source, the NRA, Turning Point USA, and Patriot Guard Riders are 3 of many non-militia groups on the list CID and FBI are using to cross-reference in vetting for potential extremists. YAF, what is that? Young Americans for Freedom?
Yep.
Also on the list. Quote, "They're looking at various TP Turning Point USA chapters in almost every university and high school where there is one. For example, high school members who are in the Future Soldiers program, which is Army's version of delayed entry program. College-age soldiers obviously already in. Investigators also looking for the following in pictures: MAGA, CAG, apparel, Gadsden flag, Confederate flag, NRA gear, and Q stuff. I can understand some of that, but the Gadsden flag, I mean, at any rate, it's all free speech. Soldiers' Facebooks, Twitter, Instagram, TikToks, and Snapchats are also being checked. Units from deep red states, such as Texas, being thoroughly examined. Left-wing anarchist groups also listed, but not a top priority. In fact, 0 have been investigated as of this evening. Leaders in both the Army and the FBI have directed to focus attention on groups with strong conservative sentiments. NCIS, AFOSI, CGIS also expecting to receive that directive from senior DOD officials in the coming days. This goes way beyond the inauguration. It won't magically stop after tomorrow. So this is actually kind of freaky seeing this, because you've got Democrats concerned that someone, has a Gadsden flag? And so they're going to investigate people and remove them from their mission, if that's the case. Are we really at the point where, we had Chris Cuomo on CNN say we can't trust our military? I mean, I see stuff like that, and I think of 2 words. You know what those 2 words are, guys? Luke's got a smile on his face.
I was going to say fish sticks.
I don't want to get I don't want to get deranked.
A civil war.
Civil war.
Oh, you like those
and
words?
Yeah, he
I
does like those
I don't like those words.
They're
But
there.
I've been talking about it for some time, and it started when, as I mentioned always, I was reading, and I think it was like New York Mag or The Atlantic. They did, for you, Steve, I'll give you the context. There was an article where they interviewed a bunch of national security experts from various major security companies and asked them what percentage likelihood they thought we had for a potential civil war. And they said in the next 10 years, like the average, I think, was like 35% or higher. Some people said 95% chance. And then watching the escalation of the culture war and the escalation of politics to this point, where we had a bunch of Trump supporters, storm through the front doors of the Capitol building. Mm-hmm. I mean, there have been people every step of the way. We've seen some kind of escalation. They've said, no, of course not. Well, now we had a retired Army general, I believe, Army, saying that we've not had this much security at an inauguration since Abraham Lincoln. So it really does feel like we are knocking on the door for some kind of major catastrophe. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean it's true. Everything could stop right now. Tomorrow could go off without a hitch, and then everyone has to slow down and calm down. I just don't see anything happening with the rhetoric from politicians, from high-profile personalities that would indicate things are going to calm down. I mean, you got AOC, you've got these leftists, Cory Bush, saying expel the insurrectionist Republicans. And so it feels like we're boiling over, and we're getting to that point. Now, there's two. But before I want to ask you this, Steve. Mm-hmm. Your business thrives when there's chaos, and I mean that with all due respect. Like when the news is bad, people are going to start thinking about what they have to do to survive.
Right.
So with that in mind, I imagine you've been tracking a lot of this stuff. You're paying attention to politics to know what might happen, what people might do, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on all of this and what you think it means.
Well, partly what we're seeing happening with so much of the military presence is because it's so fresh. So there's always an overreaction, especially when you look in the political arena, because everybody, one, has to cover themselves politically, and then, two, this really hasn't happened before, and it's shocking. It's like a 9/11 type shock to the country, but it hit so close to home to those inside those chambers. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing. Now, will it go away quickly? I would imagine it'll stay for a little while. Things will have to calm down because, like you said, the rhetoric, it's not going to stop. Now it becomes, will it become a payback scenario for how the impression is of what was done to Donald Trump? So are we now going to try to do that to Joe Biden?
I think yes. We've had, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene said she's going to file for impeachment day one.
Day one. So
here we go. I mean,
Absolutely.
is it possible we hit that ceiling where this is the level of tension we get, and then we never cross into that territory of actual disruption of supply lines and fighting?
It's possible, but what's going to happen now, groups are going to start to try to vie for attention. So there was a highway that was stopped by a Black Lives Matter group, which we haven't seen in a little bit, right? That seemed to have calmed down, but everybody now is going to vie for the attention of the incoming administration. And so the administration comes in with like a debit card of capital influence, and depending on how it's spent, it either will grow or it will dissipate. And so everybody wants to make sure the attention's on them so they can get a piece of all that.
And an important aspect to really remember here, a lot of the left has been incentivized by making a lot of noise, making a lot of trouble, creating a lot of violence, and then being heard. So there's also examples of them literally looting, rioting, and then getting their way. So that's another thing to consider moving forward in this larger kind of political spectrum.
Getting defended by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's administration. So, what's interesting is we didn't get this reaction when we had Black Lives Matter riots sweeping across the country. I mean, you guys didn't activate the ranches when all those riots were happening?
No.
But the election you did.
We did. So the way we cover our members is there's a anxiety clause. So if something happens locally, if we're not completely activated officially, they can come. They're a member. They can come if something happens locally, because there's no way to predict how these things are going to go.
So if, let's say, so you're in West Virginia, if somebody lives in, say, Pennsylvania and there's a major disaster in their town,
yes,
they can come to the ranch.
Absolutely.
Because it's about, their survival. They can't just go anywhere. They'll have somewhere to go.
Right.
Right on. So I guess, when we're looking at what's going on in D.C. and everything that's happened over the past 10 years, the escalation, I mentioned that article where they talk about security experts giving their predictions. Do you think that we are on track for some kind of political instability? I'm not going to say, outright civil war, but instability to the point where you will have your members coming in for safety and security?
Well, so it depends. Things are so fresh. Things are very raw. We rate these things. We give out certain levels for when we put out our newsletters to our members, so that they understand what the different factors are, whether it be from something happening with nuclear to a war, all of the different factors that you have to worry about. And we have it at 5% right now as far as what is the danger for civil unrest. And
5%?
In the sense of how it would affect, we're always looking towards the collapse scenario.
Yeah.
However, you get there probably through a few crises, right?
Yeah.
So, just like COVID. COVID was a wake-up call because we were completely unprepared. Again, that was a 9/11 event, something you don't prepare for, you don't see coming, and boom, there it is. But, we've been talking about it for a while. And the fact is, we're talking about 1.8% morbidity,
mortality?
Yes.
Morbidity?
Yeah. There
Thank
we
you.
go. Yeah.
All
That's,
of the above.
that's the nerve agent.
That's
So then, what happens if that was 5%? This would be a completely different climate. And that's not even talking about bioengineered type of viruses. It's doable. We don't believe that that's what happened with COVID, but it is doable. That
Right.
technology exists, and that should be enough to scare anyone. And again, we're not doomsday, type prepper people where we believe the world's ending tomorrow and all this type of thing. But the fact that that is out there and can be released really should be an eye-opener.
And I'll just mention, too, you mentioned the nerve agent. For those that, before the show, you mentioned that you were in, I think, Iraq, and you got swept over by sarin.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was during Desert Storm when we finally wound up there.
So that I just want to give quick context. I definitely want to get into that stuff later, but people are probably wondering what you meant when you pointed to your head and said nerve agent.
Yeah, if I get blocked in thought, it's just the synapses is trying to reconnect up there.
Well, specifically what you were talking about before was gain of function studies that have proven to have no scientific basis at all, but it's pretty much when scientists come together and they're literally trying to create the worst destructive disease or virus possible. And a lot of times this is funded by a lot of taxpayer-funded money, and everyone's scratching their head like, why is this going on? Dr. Fauci was a part of financing this, also in Wuhan, and just the fact that they continue this type of research is something to, of course, worry about, which is why I think you're putting it in your threat assessment.
Weaponization.
Yeah,
I think it's simple. You say that there's no scientific benefit. Of course, it's the new frontier of war, right?
Yeah.
It's horrifying what they did. I mean, you look at mustard gas, you look at sarin gas, you look at what these things do to people.
Agent Orange.
Yeah, nightmarish, horrifying. Well, the next level up is a self-replicating contagion. Imagine if you could make sarin gas, but it would replicate itself and spread to other people. Well, that's part of this research. I can only imagine that the military's got some crazy stuff.
Did you prep the story about the scientist who said he had... Well, it's from the Daily Caller. The title is U.S. Scientist Who Led Charge Against COVID Lab Leak Theory Admits He Was Trying to Protect Chinese Scientists. So this guy came out and said it did not leak from the Chinese lab, and now he admits that he was trying to protect the Chinese scientists involved.
So we don't have any confirmation of the lab leak theory, but I will say it's strange. The New York, I think it was New York Magazine. It's always, I think, New York Magazine. They wrote an article going through the theory that it was... I guess the idea is they were trying to do research on it, either to make a vaccine. And I'm not saying it's true. YouTube, calm down. This is what was published in a prominent New York publication where a guy wrote that there is a very real theory among scientists that it was an accidental release, that they were engineering this for a variety of reasons and made a mistake.
Yeah. There's also some video footage going around showing how one of the scientists at this level 3 Wuhan lab was actually bitten by a bat and had COVID-like symptoms all the way back a few years ago. But there's, as you were saying, it's almost impossible to prove that it did come out of that lab, especially with China locking out the World Health Organization for over a year from even investigating the origins of this sickness. But kind of continuing back on the military aspect, since you were in the military, I really specifically was dying to ask you, what do you think it does to morale to be vetted, like we're seeing the vetted going on right now? And how is the political kind of climate affecting the military? And how do you think it would be affected from your experience in the military?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because certainly during my time, I never experienced anything like that. We never had such heightened political tension that it was really a factor when you sat around in the barracks or something. It really wasn't, part of my experience, but I can tell you from anybody who is serving or has served, it's like a slap in the face. It's something you take pride in. I mean, I think it's 1% of all of the 330 some odd million people, only 1% serve.
Yeah. And I have to imagine of these 12 guards that got removed, they probably have a lot of friends who are still there on the mission. And I can only imagine they're not happy about being removed. And I'm sure they kind of just say like, yeah, that's the game. You get orders, you follow your orders.
Well, they'll do their duty, and that when it comes down to it, they'll do their duty.
But like you mentioned, a slap in the face. I have to imagine their friends probably feel loyal to their friends.
Yeah.
Someone you serve with, someone you know and you trust, and then they say, no, this person's not trustworthy. Get him out of here. And you're like, dude, come on, like what's the deal?
Yeah.
Well, you're deemed as a threat for liking something online or retweeting something. Now, we don't know what was
the Gadsden flag, dude.
Yeah.
The symbol of the American Revolution, a symbol of the American Revolution, is grounds for removing you from your duty to protect the Capitol.
You said the NRA? People that have...
So part of Jack Posobiec's thread is they're saying that some people who posted or associated with the NRA, it's insane.
I kind of mixed feelings. Like, you need to protect your military, and if you have traitors in the military, that's a problem. But assuming that these people are traitors, is also can be a problem, and that's a dark road to
Well,
go.
that's a big word, traitor.
The problem is, well, I think the legal definition of traitor is actually providing aid or resource to an active enemy of the United States. So I think, traitor gets thrown around a whole lot. The problem is when it comes to people storming into the Capitol, those people thought they were the patriots. That
Right.
By going in there, they were restoring the Constitution, defending it, and that the people in the chamber they believed were the bad guys. Everybody's the hero of their own story.
Yep.
It's not so simple. So the most powerful thing in this whole situation is the media narrative, which is why we're now just about 2 weeks out from the storming of the U.S. Capitol. Every day, it's been like 50 stories in a variety of ways, many of which are just ridiculous, many of which just are trying as hard as possible to make it as crazy as possible. There was one story that came out where they said it was pre-planned and they were planning on taking hostages and assassinating these people. And then like 3 hours later, that wasn't true. We made a mistake. So that's what happens when the media is driven to pump out the most sensational, insane, media. And I think for a lot of the people who work for these news outlets, they're ideologically tribal left. So it fits their narrative and it fits their bias, and they get to write about this nonstop. And that it's everything they wanted. It was probably one of the stupidest things anyone could have done is storming into that Capitol for a variety of reasons, just on moral grounds, legal grounds, and then in actual reference to the political landscape, gave the left everything they could have wanted. I remember there was, I'm not sure if it was Newsweek. I think it was Newsweek, where they said if Trump loses it was like in 2016, said what happens if Trump loses? And it's a picture of a bunch of like middle-aged white people holding torches and yelling and screaming, and they're like, that's what's going to happen if Trump loses. And then Trump won. And it was the left that, kind of went nuts and were screaming, and the Democrats went after Trump, trying to impeach him. Well, sure enough, Trump loses this time, and they got their prophecy fulfilled by people storming that Capitol, and they are not going to let it go. They're going to use it for all it's worth.
Yeah, there's a new video going around today that's called #Trump's New Army.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much calling Trump supporters traitorous terrorists. Brett Weinstein called this out. I saw it from him retweeting it, saying this is essentially trying to get your neighbors into a civil war. So this is Brett Weinstein's commentary on the video that is making its round around kind of liberal checkmarks. Do you have an opinion about maybe what happened on the Capitol or this kind of political climate that seems to be getting more and more weaponized against each other?
Well, we definitely have entered into a period of lost perspective. No one can understand why the other person feels that way, and we need to take a step back as a country and look at our fellow man differently, because not everyone's the enemy just because they voted one way or the other. I honestly don't quite understand why the line is drawn so harshly the way that it's been drawn, but this has been building up for a while. The signs have all been there, but when you actually see it erupt like it has, then you really have to understand that we're still the same people we were 4 years ago. Let's all calm down for a second.
I think there's the ideology is drifting too far too fast.
Right.
And I think, they'll call me biased, but I think the left is drifting very, very far. It's not necessarily to the left, but the tribal division is coming from those associated with more of the left faction, the anti-Trump groups.
Yeah.
The example I give is, the journalist from CNN, I shouldn't call him a journalist, the activist from CNN, who's now calling up cable providers and telling them to ban Fox News. 4 years ago, this guy interviewed me about defending free speech. So he's part of this group that has just drifted further and further into the extremes. I'm sitting in the exact same place, defending free speech and all that. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.